Good morning, everybody. This is Walk the Dog with Riot Mort, and it is Wednesday, about 7:15. A little bit of a late start for me. I had a late night last night, and so tried to sleep in a little, although failed and just kind of laid in bed. But I'm here at the Riot campus, walking around, and no one's doing yard work today, so I can hear myself. So I'm just going to walk in the center of the main campus. There's this circle that is there for walking, and so we're just going to walk that today and talk about things. And yeah, it's been a productive trip so far. Interestingly enough, we had some guests from our Fight for the Golden Spatula team here this week. Pure coincidence. I didn't realize they were coming when I planned my trip. But went out to dinner with them last night, caught up, talked about various things, got invited to some of their meetings. So yeah, the positive is I get a lot of face-to-face interactions. I get to have a lot of good, meaningful conversations with folks on my team. The bad news is I don't get any work done. I'm very behind on work. The one thing is we did get the patch done. Branch cut was early yesterday, so that's locked. I got to check on some things that hopefully didn't get broken, but overall, yeah. It's been interesting to see, by the way, the perception of the current live patch seems to have deteriorated pretty heavily. It's pretty amazing how such a small patch can make such a big impact, but at least from what I've been reading, people don't seem that happy with 14.6, or at least I should say the highest level players don't seem happy. Generally, the general populace is pretty happy. But yeah, so we'll see if a couple small adjustments. Next patch, there will be some undos. There will be some things that, get changed. But yeah, so, all right. Today I have 3 questions, and they're all kind of long ones, so I don't even know if I'm going to get through all 3. And the first one here was, can you give me insights to the process involved in creating, developing R&D projects? So I'm not going to be the best person to give you an answer for this. Generally, a lot of my time at Riot, I think of the, 8.5, almost 9 years I've been here, I think all but like 9 to 12 months of it are on like stuff about, live service games, things like that. So I don't really do a lot of that here. At Nintendo I did some, but yeah, so again, there's probably people out there that will give you a better answer, but let me talk about some of the things I don't like or like about it. Generally, when people think about, an R&D game as something you would be getting to develop, it's like you have the potential, essentially a blank canvas, to make any cool game, right? Like the next big cool game that could revolutionize the industry or make a brand new mechanic or something like that. But that's not really what happens in this industry. Generally, a lot of times what'll happen is someone at the business or product level will come to you with a goal, right? So at Nintendo, for example, it was, hey, actually like Aura Climber is a really good example, where the thing that we came to was, hey, we have this DSiWare shop coming out, and your goal is to make a game in less than 6 months that we could put on this DSiWare shop that, will fill the DSiWare shop with more products. I was like, okay. And so originally we actually started with like a spin-off of Mario versus Donkey Kong where you would fight bosses. And that didn't really work out. And while developing that, we found this like tether mechanic that one of our engineers, John, had made. And I turned that into a pitch where you'd have a little character using that tether mechanic to jump up and collect things. And so they said, okay, and then you move forward, right? But like, ultimately, at the end of the day, it wasn't a blank canvas. It was specify this goal. And that's generally true for every project I worked at Nintendo. It's sort of like, okay, we have this 3DS hardware coming out, and we want you to make a title that'll come out in the first 6 weeks. Oh, and we also want it to be a Mario versus Donkey Kong game. Good luck. And like that was the thing. Or if you were lucky, you could talk some of the higher up people into agreeing to a goal. So like, for example, with Amiibo Challenge, this was me saying, I was in some meeting and I was like, hey, I would love to make a title that supports people who buy all these Amiibos, because, you know, Amiibos were actually supposed to do things, not just be cool little figures on your shelf. And I was like, hey, how about we make a title that rewards people for buying these and gives them some free content? And they were like, oh, okay, we're kind of down with that. Go forth, right? But yeah, so, and a lot of the times at Nintendo, for example, if you didn't have one of these clear goals, your project would get shot down. For example, I know a lot of different divisions of Nintendo would pitch like, I just want to make the next Kid Icarus. And they would just get rejected because it's like, well, what's the point? Like, you can't just say, I want to make the next in a series. You need to have a clear product goal that helps Nintendo achieve its business. And so, you know, if you're somebody who's more the creative type of just like, wouldn't these games be neat? You're going to struggle pretty heavily because you have to think about it in terms of the business, not in terms of this would just be neat. Which is a shame. And again, like, I'm sure anyone watching this who's just a fan of video games is like, well, that's dumb. I just want to make a cool game. And yeah, well, that's kind of the trade-off, right? Then once you get started on this, and this is where I can talk about my time on like Project Hammer, then what's really scary about an R&D game is you could work on this game for 1, 2, 5, 10 years. And if, let's just say you're a random low-level designer or artist on a team, your job is to do the things you've been ordered to do, right? So like, hey, low-level designer on Project Hammer, your job is to use the enemies we've created. You don't have any say in that. And we want you to make level 3, right? You're going to make stage 3, and it's this New York battle, and the centerpiece is halfway through the level. The artists are making this skyscraper that's going to get attacked. Yes, that's a real thing. And you're like, okay, so you make the best level you can. But the reality is, if the core mechanics aren't fun, you can only make as good of a level as you can with those core mechanics and those enemies you've been provided. You know, when you have 4 different types of enemies, you're like, okay, well, I'll do 3 of the little enemy, and then 6 of the little enemy, and then 1 of the big enemy with 2 of the little enemies. And then I'll mix it up and have 4 of the swarm enemies. Okay. Like, there's only so many combinations of things you can do, but you do your best work. And despite all that, you know, you can't, as a small cog in that machine, you can't really make that big an impact. And then if the game ends up not being fun, well, guess what? It never ships. And all of a sudden your, 1, 2, 5, 10 years working on something is null and void. It's null and void, and you have nothing to show for it. And so I've been lucky that thankfully there's only 2 times in my career where something I worked on didn't go out the door. One at Nintendo, one at Riot. But not everyone's that lucky, right? Or even worse, imagine working on something for 8 years and then it ships and it's garbage, sells like nothing, and ruins the company, right? And like, what do you have to show for 8 years in the industry? Well, you worked on insert bad title here, And that's one of the riskiest, scariest things about R&D. Now, obviously the pro here is like, for every giant colossal failure or risky thing, there is a, hey, I was one of the original designers on League of Legends, and that game ended up becoming gangbusters, and I, kind of a rock star now. And there's definitely like, basically the way I would phrase it is, working in the R&D space in the game industry is high risk, high reward, right? Like, you can completely crash out and end up doing nothing, or you can define the industry and move forward. And so that's kind of the big trade-off. Now compare that to a live service game, right? Like TFT, there are elements of R&D in it, right? Like anytime we make a new set, you need to innovate the mechanics or the champions or come up with, improvements to the game, things like that. But the reality is, you have a good blueprint, you know what the game is, you know what the core is. It's pretty hard to really screw it up. right? And the same is true of League, right? Like, if you look at a game like League of Legends, at the end of the day, whether, dragons or bushes or whatever you change, the core game is still the core game, which is really good and was successful for a reason. You're not gonna, you're not gonna blow anything up. And so I would call it, lower risk, lower reward. And that's actually one of the things a lot of creatives struggle with. It's like, who wants to work on World of Warcraft that's been around for 20 years when you can only innovate so much, right? A lot of people who are in this space want to be creative and want to innovate on the games they work on. But, if player expectations are, don't change anything, it's pretty tough. Or, if you're on League and you're making the 175th champion, it's like, that space has been pretty explored, Now, that is one of the reasons I love working on TFT, is because every set is essentially a mini R&D project where we get to like push the limits. But again, you can only push the limits so much, right? Like, you're not going to change TFT to a kart racer or a, turn-based RPG. Like, that's just not happening. And so if your interest is in making a turn-based RPG, well, then being on TFT is not going to do that for you, So big things there is that, like I said, it can high risk, high reward, ruin your career, but also elevate your career, yada, yada, yada. And again, it really just depends on like how much of a creative drive you have, right? Like, some designers, like say myself, will be really happy working on, a game where, or like, for example, the League of Legends mission system, right? Like, that was something I worked on early on that maybe a super creative person is like, the mission system, that's boring. But I think a good professional designer can get in there and go, well, I'm going to make the best, most efficient mission system that we can do with 3 months. Here you go. And they're sort of proud of that problem they solve, right? Because again, I'm less creative and more logical. And so solving those problems for me is kind of the excitement. But like I said, if you're more of a, and I think that it's funny, like one of the titles of, we didn't have these at Nintendo so much, but Western indie companies have them as creative director. Like, I would be a horrible creative director, right? Creative directors like build the world and the fantasy and talk about like the thematics and stuff like that. I would be so bad at that. Oftentimes I see in a lot of R&D stuff that like we get too far ahead on those things and people forget gameplay mechanics, but yada, yada, yada. Anyway, so yeah, that's kind of the pros and cons of R&D. I think the one last story I can tell is like one of my last Nintendo projects before it became Amiibo Challenge. We had this like 6-month period where me and my engineering buddy Dean were sort of like, they were like, you can pitch different things. I think we pitched like 6 or 7 different projects. One of which, hilariously enough, is like a really archaic version of TFT if you think about it, though it's pretty disconnected. It's like, it wasn't that similar. But we pitched all these R&D games, and here's the scary thing about that process, is you have to pitch it to people that might not understand the industry, might not want to take risks, might not understand the business, And so a lot of the things we would pitch at Nintendo, they would sort of be like, well, we're not sure this could be successful. Well, this doesn't seem like a Mario vs. Donkey Kong game. Well, you've only shipped puzzle games. We're not sure you could do this other type of game. And so they just kind of reject them. And it can feel arbitrary, these rejections of like, okay, well, if you hate this idea, And that was actually one of the things that caused me to want to leave Nintendo, was sort of like, after 6 months of pitching various things, only to end up back at, hey, we'll accept it if you pitch another puzzle game with Mario vs. Donkey Kong, but anything else? Probably not. Was like, okay, I get it. You want me to be the Mario vs. Donkey Kong factory for the rest of my life. I think I'm good, So I think that's why you see a lot of companies that maybe get stuck making the same game over and over, So, yeah. It's also why it's hard to keep people at the same company. It's like, imagine you worked on, I don't know, Halo 2, 3, and 4, and you've been doing that for 12 years, and someone's like, all right, time for Halo 5, and you're like, but I only have so much time in this industry. Let me do something else, you know? So there you go. Hopefully that was at least somewhat insightful. All right, next question. This one's from Mr. Raptor. It was kind of asking for my general thoughts on set 14. And like I said, obviously there's a learnings article coming out. We'll talk about that. So I don't want to, spoil everything in the learnings article or anything like that. But here's where I'm at with sort of sets on TFT. We're never going to make a terrible set. And yes, I know there are people on the internet who are going to say set 14 is a terrible set or the worst set or blah, 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 blah. That's the internet. It's just talking. Set 14 is not the worst set we've ever made. Now, is it the best set we've ever made? No, not even close. I think right now that the way I measure the success of a set beyond the because a lot of people will talk about balance, and it's like balance is actually one of the least, it's not that important. Whether the balance is good or bad, it'll work out, right? We've seen a good patch, at least one good patch in set 14 where the set is super balanced. Does that make the set super fun? Not really. The challenge with TFT, in my opinion, is that TFT continues to be a game where it's at its most fun when you are experiencing something new that you've never seen before in an interesting way, and you're like, that was cool, right? Whether it be combination of mechanics, things like charms or anomalies, mixed in with a cool champion kit, mixed in with, various other parts of the game. That's when I think TFT is at its best. So to me, a lot of the ways I measure if a set was successful was how innovative it was and how memorable it was. And I think there are parts of 14 that are pretty memorable. I think Zach, for example, is probably the best example of a 5 cost that you can cap out endgame boards with, and he does it in a fun way. Buying the blobs is kind of cute and charming. I think Zach is great. I think Garen was a really interesting 5 cost, and we'll remember modding champions with traits, which is really cool. I think there are a couple of the hacks that will be memorable, the gold split was kind of fun when that happens. Or the silly large carousel that we added, where the carousel has 16 things on it. It's that's kind of cute. That's kind of charming. But beyond a couple really standout examples, I think overall the set played it safe, right? The origins are all functional, right? Street Demon is functional. I think Exotech is functional. I think Anima Squad played it a little safe. If anything, I think Anima Squad kind of had the fun balanced out of it a little bit, but but overall we played it safe with this set. And I think playing it safe leads to a set that's just kind of fine. TFT is still a fun game at its core, kind of like I was just saying about the R&D thing. It's it's still fun. I've still had some great games on stream, some really great moments. I think there's still good augments in the set, although not a lot of new good augments, but still good augments and lead to really fun situations. I think Golden Ox actually got salvaged pretty hard. Golden Ox was actually the trait I was the most worried about pre-launch. But then we threw out some big buffs and we improved things, and it actually ended up not so bad. So I think Golden Ox actually ended up pretty fun. When you have 4 and 6 Golden Ox and you're just dropping lots of gold, that's pretty cool. I think Cypher is a shadow of Heartsteel. It's acceptable. There's always going to be the people at Challenger level who don't like high-risk traits, but then we have so many players who love them. But I don't think Cypher will go down as one of our best by any means. So, like I said, to me, the set is it's just okay. But that's the thing, in this industry, shipping something that's just okay isn't good enough. why are people going to keep playing your just okay product when there's really good products out there, right? Like, if you have a choice between playing set 14, which is some same old, or something like Expedition 33, which is this like new beautiful turn-based RPG, like, yeah, that's you're not going to stand up. And so to me, I think my reflection on 14 is just that, we gotta push ourselves harder. We gotta really innovate more, really push the limits. And kind of like we talked about high risk, high reward, like when we push these limits, there might be a set that's a stinker because we tried something really weird and it just didn't work. But I think that's going to be worth it because the payoffs when it does work are going to be really, really good, right? And so like, what do you remember about 13? It was like, oh, the anomaly was pretty sweet and made some cool stuff. And there were all these new unique characters that had never been in League of Legends before. That's memorable. What's memorable about 14? Well, Jack's neat, I think that's the gauge. I think people are going to talk about the quality or the competitive ladder or whatever. I don't think that matters. I think what matters is, what do you remember from 14? And if the thing you remember is Hollowbow Zeri, so that's kind of how I look at it. But someday I can tell more stories about like how that came to be, why that was, because that's the other thing. A lot of the times you can't look at an individual set in context of itself. You have to look at a set relative to all the other work going around it, right? The most famous example of this was like set 5 and set 6. Set 5, we had to make some cuts and sacrifices and even moved I'm sure I've told this story before, but augments were pitched for set 5, but we had such confidence in augments and we knew set 6 was the arcane set. So we moved augments to set 6 so that the arcane set would have the coolest feature. Like, that's a holistic decision you have to make because it makes sense from a strategy perspective. And I know someone on Reddit right now is going, see, they have to sack a set. That's not quite what I'm saying, but there is some truth to that of like, or if you've got 3 teams making sets and, one of your teams has your best designer, it's like, well, which set do we have to put our best designer on? These are tough decisions. But overall, to me, I'll probably do this at some point on stream, but like, if I put set 14 on my tier list, I probably put it at like low B. It's still B tier. It's not bad. But I do think it doesn't really wow anyone ever. There's not a lot of things that wow it. And so it's probably around set 11 and 12 for me. It feels like another one of those kind of sets. But again, like I said, I don't think we'll ever ship a bad set anymore. Like 14 is not C tier. It's just not. So, and if anything, if any of the feeling that you get that it feels like C tier, it's more just like because you've played a lot like it before. You're getting tired, We've seen plenty of people who have like recently come back to TFT or are starting to go deep into TFT and actually like really enjoying the set because they didn't play 11 and 12 and stuff like that. So, yeah. So, anyway, that's that. Let's see if I can get through this last question. Oh yeah, this one's a good one. So I'm in LA right now. I'm at Riot Campus. And this person's asking, are there things you miss about going to the Riot Campus each day? What are the pros and cons? So I'm only going to answer this question for me, as somebody who's been on the team for a while and pretty established, versus like a brand new employee. Because like there are different pros and cons for that audience. For me, I definitely miss the like deep conversations I'm having here. Like the ability to just walk up to Blue Velvet or Kent and just be like, yo, you want to talk for a second? Like there was a designer who's been on a slightly different project on TFT. I just walked up to him like, hey, you got 5 minutes? And we jammed and started talking about some stuff, and that was really healthy. That doesn't really happen when you're remote, Or really interesting is like when you walking through the campus and you run into somebody that you like just don't or ever work with, right? Like this could be me running into Medler, or this could be me running into like our CEO, and you get like that 1 minute like, hey, how's it going? You know, that matters. Like that matters, that forms connections. And I do miss that. I think that's the big thing I've kind of lost. I like, you know, 4 designers in a room with a whiteboard talking about a problem, or, you know, working with somebody on the next patch notes and teaching them about balance and passing on wisdom. It just works better in person. So I think all of that has been something that I've kind of given up, which is not great. But here's the trade-offs. I ain't gotten shit done this week. I have been talking and walking and meeting and whatever. And it's like, I also still have to do like some mid-year reviews for my direct reports. I haven't gotten those done. I'm supposed to be looking at set 15 more. I haven't been able to do that because I'm on my laptop and I can't. Like, I spend most of my time in meetings and talking when I'm here. Whereas when I'm home, the like 7 to 10 block before people get here, I can work. I can get stuff done. Or, you know, hey, the day's over at 5, all my meetings are over, and I can just turn on some music and work. So like in terms of like actual output, I'm way less productive here. It's not even close to how unproductive I am. But yeah, that's kind of the big stuff. Yeah. See, like, here's an example. I just ran into somebody who I haven't seen in forever. We get to say hi, and it's like, you still exist, hooray! So, yeah.
Oh, yeah.
Yep. So, but yeah, that's kind of the trade-off. So, yeah. And we're actually, we're getting, it's like, what, 7:40, so people are starting to show up to the office, some of the other early risers here. So, people are starting to come in. But yeah, so that's kind of the immediate pros and cons for me. Now, obviously, that's excluding the other stuff like, you know, traveling. Like, my God, I do not miss traveling. If I could teleport here, though, I was telling my boss's boss, Jeff, that if I could teleport here, I'd probably still be here like 4 or 5 days a week. It's that valuable if I could teleport here, but I can't. So kind of a moot point, but yeah. So yeah, I think that's kind of it. I think generally I feel pretty distant to a lot of the team as well, just because it's like, oh, he lives out in the middle of nowhere, you know. Lots of jokes about how, oh, Mort came back from the forest to work on stuff. So it is what it is. So, all right, there you go. It's been about 28 minutes. This should be good. Those were 3 good questions, hopefully good topics. Tomorrow, interestingly enough, here is a holiday. So no one will be at the campus other than one of the teams I'm working with on the thing. We decided to work through the holiday and then make it up next week. So it'll actually be a pretty quiet day, and maybe I'll actually get some stuff done. I think I also want to work on those mid-year reviews like I was talking about. So I should be able to get that done. But yeah, and then this weekend, patch rundown. And yeah, that's kind of it. Oh yeah, and we'll talk about the curveball. So yeah. All right, I think that's it. Hopefully you guys have a great day. The other fun thing is tonight, a bunch of rioters, we're getting together, and we're going to do a Final Fantasy Magic draft. So that'll be fun. Kind of looking forward to that tonight. So, cool. All right, that's going to do it for me. Until next time, take it easy.